Chapter 3, Flint. For a moment, Flint did nothing at all. He just stared at the girl in front of him. Her body was almost blue from the chill, but she wasn't shivering. She was absolutely still, like a doll. Only her face seemed alive. Turn the key in the pedestal 3 turns to the right and half turn left. Flint frowned. The girl's voice was hoarse and weak, but there was something strangely magnetic about it, and despite the dangers all around him, he found himself drawn to her. Please, the girl begged. It will undo the spell. Shaking himself, Flint gathered his rope into his rucksack, slipped off his crampons, and dropped down into the hall. He couldn't risk being seen by the Tusk guards. But still, he said nothing. Who was this girl? Flint's mind raced as he took in the shock of red hair. The Tusks were blonde, the furs had brown hair, and the feathers had hair the colour of midnight. This girl didn't fit. But those eyes, big and bright and blue, brought back memories of the Tusk spies Flint had seen in the forest last month. And if this girl was a Tusk spy, he wasn't getting mixed up with her. Not when he had a rescue mission ahead of him. He took a step into the hall and he felt Pebble tense inside his hood. The Fox pup's ears were trained to sounds most humans missed, and Flint listened hard until he, too, could make out a faint tapping sound, like metal clanging from deeper within the palace. The girl blinked frightened eyes at Flint. Please, she said again, there isn't much time. Despite the pull of her voice, Flint took a few more nervous steps over the ice-crusted floor, past the organ in the middle of the room, below the chandelier spread with candles that burned with bright blue flames, and on towards the silver trees and the doorway leading further into the palace. Somewhere beyond that door was his ma. I know I don't look or sound like much, the girl whispered from behind, but for some reason the Ice Queen thinks my voice is important. Flint kept walking, but his ears snagged on those last words, because with every sentence this girl uttered, he could feel himself being folded further into her story. Her voice, whether he liked it or not, did seem to hold some sort of quiet power. I know things from being locked up here in the palace, she went on. And if you set me free, I can help you find whoever you come for. The girl stifled a sob, and Flint recognised something in her, something desperate, despite her stillness, like the beating fear in the eyes of a wounded animal. And it was harder to keep walking away than he expected. He threw a glance over his shoulder. What's your name? Eska. And your tribe? There were tears standing in Eska's eyes now. I don't remember a tribe. The Ice Queen took my memories when she locked me in this music box. Everyone belongs to a tribe. Flint looked her up and down, and the hardness closed back around him. Tusk, probably. We all know the only reason Tusk children roam without fear is because they are the Ice Queen's spies and their parents are her guards. He turned away and concentrated on the hall. It was detours like this, a term his parents had come up with for the distracted, almost sideways nature of his adventures that always got him into such a mess. And these detours were the reason Tomkin had carved the words, "Decide where you're going and go there," on the runners of his sledge. The trouble was, Flint realised as he tiptoed over the ice, he usually only discovered where he was going halfway through a journey. And when he arrived, he was often somewhere he hadn't intended to be. But this was a journey to bring back his ma, and he wasn't going to let a stranger who didn't even know her tribe get in the way of that. He took a few more steps across the room, mumbling to himself as he went, "Stupid tusk, spy." But even as he said those words, he knew they weren't true. The girl was afraid, really afraid, and Flint had done enough hunting to know what fear looked like. What if she really was the Ice Queen's prisoner and knew things Tomkin needed to hear to stage his rebellion? Flint dug his nails into his hands. He could sense there was something more to the girl than he was seeing. "Find Ma first," he murmured. Pebble, though, had other ideas. Wriggling free from Flint's hood, the fox pup dropped to the ground and ran up to the pedestal. "Pebble!" Flint hissed. "We need to go!" But the fox pup was clambering onto the pedestal now, and Flint watched open-mouthed as Pebble raised a tentative paw towards Esker. The little animal was usually cautious and untrusting around those he didn't know, and yet with Esker he didn't seem afraid. Flint watched as Pebble rubbed his body against the girl's dress and then licked her ice-cold toes before turning to Flint and making a quiet huffing sound. "We don't even know what tribe she's from, Pebble. Even if she's not working for the Ice Queen, she could be dangerous." He glanced across the hall towards the door between the silver trees. "Come on!" But the fox pup wove between Esker's legs and turned his twitching nose back to Flint. The boy grimaced. Tomkin had reminded him only the day before about harnessing the mind of a warrior, becoming silent, focused and deadly. He cursed under his breath. What was he about to do? What he was about to do was not focused, and it was decidedly undeadly. He hurried back to the pedestal and he placed a hand on the jet black key. Esker's eyes glittered, and though her words were faint, she repeated her plea. 3 turns to the right, then half a turn left. Flint shot Pebble a withering look. "It's all your fault if it all goes wrong." Pebble flicked his tail defiantly. Then Flint's mitten closed around the key and he turned it just the way Esker had said. For a few seconds there was a grinding sound, like musical notes draining away, and then there was a click as the key finally rotated left. Esker slumped onto the pedestal, and for a moment Flint wondered whether he killed the girl. A death on top of a detour would be hard to explain to Tomkin. But then slowly, shakily, Esker raised her head. She looked at her hands first, turning them this way and that, as if she couldn't believe that they belonged to her. And then she flexed her toes. "Thank you," she gasped. "Thank you." But as she struggled to her feet, the whispers began. Flint jerked his head upwards. They were coming from the blue candles flickering in the chandelier. "Come to the hall, the candles have spoken. The curse on the child has now been broken. Come to the hall." All the candles have spoken. The curse on the child has now been broken. Again and again the flames whispered, and Flint's blood curdled. He scooped Pebble up into his hood and turned to Esker. "You didn't tell me the candles were spies." Esker staggered off the pedestal, then fell to her knees under the strain of using muscles so long locked under a spell. She scrambled for the wall and hauled herself up. I didn't know," she stammered. And then her voice grew harder and she glanced at the arches. "We have to leave." Flint's jaw stiffened. "I'm here to free my ma, and you're going to show me how I get through this palace to the ice towers, like you promised."